Yeah, so this is Web Experiences Meetup. Someone I met here came to the meetup when it used to be called Talk Squarespace, but I sort of rebranded it, and now it's Web Experiences. And basically what we talk about is content, design, development, and everything in between. Anything about building cool experiences online is basically what I talk about. So in this talk, I thought I would cover style guides and design system because I've gotten a few questions from people about these recently and some of the work I'm doing professionally. It just seemed like a cool topic to talk about. So that's what we're going to cover, and a little bit about me. So currently I'm a design engineer at Uber. Basically what that means is I'm someone who knows a little bit about product design as well as front-end engineering. We sit between product design and the visual designers as well as our full-stack engineering team. And our job is to ensure that we build cool stuff on the web. So primarily I'm working on Uber.com, Uber.com's front end and some of our other web properties, as well as the publishing platforms and the CMS platforms that power Uber.com. And it's super cool. It's letting us build a lot of cool stuff and sort of elevate the front end of Uber.com. We still have a lot of work to do, but it's a work in progress, and it's pretty cool. So outside of that, I host and speak, and today also check in people for the Web Experiences Meetup. It's sort of a side gig that I'm doing, and that's pretty cool as well because I get to talk about a lot of the stuff that I'm learning and different things that I come across on the web. So in the context of this talk, I want to jump right into, because we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to do some live demos, so hopefully they work out well. But web content style guides. And style guides, that term's kind of thrown around for all different reasons. There's design style guides and visual style guides and all kinds of weird stuff. But in the context of this talk, we're going to start with web content style guides, which basically is a business's documentation for how to write written content on the web. So what I want to do is actually show you a demo, show you what a couple companies are doing on the web and how we can possibly create our own very quickly for low cost, if not free. So let's jump right into it and see how this goes. So I have Chrome here. Let me know if it's a little too small. I'll try to enlarge the text on some of these things. If you can't see it, just shout it out and yell at me. It's totally fine. So one of the companies that I've been following for a while is Mailchimp. They're an email marketing platform. They've been around for years. Now they're one of the largest email marketing platforms. They're still doing really well. And one of the interesting things they've done over the last couple years, and they're by no means the first company to do this, but they released their style guide, their web content style guide, online for free. So you can actually go to it right now at styleguide.mailchimp.com, and you'll see basically this website. I'm actually not on the home page. Let me click to that. And you can see right at the top here, if I make this a little bit larger, this style guide was created for Mailchimp employees, but we hope it's helpful. So this is an example where a company decided to just write their content style guide in public, release it to the world, and then anyone, any other person in the world who's running a startup or who works for a company can basically take it, reuse it, and of course, give them some credit for it. But for the most part, this can get you a lot of the way there. Now, why is this useful? That's kind of the big question and the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because a lot of companies don't actually have a style guide for anything. And a big part of when you're trying to grow a business is you need to create consistent communication across the board, no matter how you're reaching your user. So the reason I think content style guides are so important is because this is the primary way that you're going to reach potential customers, maybe current users. This is how you're going to give support to your existing customers. Basically, any way that you're reaching someone with written word, like text messages, push notifications, email marketing, even your web content, you have to have documentation for how you do that. So if you look at some of this stuff on Mailchimp here, for example, I'm going to click the second link here, which is voice and tone. So Mailchimp here talks about the difference between voice and tone, what they should do, how their employees should talk to customers. And you can see like Mailchimp's voice is fun but not silly, confident but not cocky, smart. So they basically just analyzed and said, how do we want to be perceived when we talk to our users, and what should we do? And then they've created this style guide, and basically their employees have to follow it. And this is great for a number of reasons. I think it's probably obvious once you start reading some of these links, and I definitely urge a lot of you to just go to this website and check out how Mailchimp describes it. There's also tons of different companies that are doing very similar things. The benefit here is that when they onboard a new employee, they don't have to do big training sessions. I mean, obviously training is going to be part of onboarding any employee, but they can refer to their employees to just go to this website, read how to do it, maybe just tell them to sit down and go through it for a day and learn all about how the Mailchimp should be talking to customers. Now, how would you get this for your business? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious once you see that this is free and open source, and there's tons of different versions of this from different companies. But the easy way is you could probably just open a Google Doc and copy, paste it into a Google Doc, and start building it for your business. I mean, that's what everyone should do, in my opinion. That's the easiest way to get started with it. You can start working with your team. If you're maybe a single founder or you don't have a team yet, this is something you should be able to do in just a couple hours, and Google Docs is a good way to do it. What I'm going to do in this demo is show you how we can basically build this and take it right to a website, basically just using some of the tools that Mailchimp provides, or not tools, but they put this on a GitHub repo where you can basically just download it and start working with it almost immediately. So let's do a quick example of how we would do this to get us up to speed, or get this onto a website fairly quickly. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I've already built a front end for a website and it's connected to a content management system. But basically what you want to do is put this content into some sort of a CMS. Now, Google Docs is technically a way to manage content, so that's a content management system. But in the context of web experiences and what we're trying to do, that's not really a CMS. A CMS is more like Squarespace or WordPress, or one of my favorite companies, Contentful, which is sort of an API-driven CMS where the front end doesn't matter and you can build it however you want. So let's do that for this example. So how would we do that here? Well, the easiest way is right on Mailchimp's overview page. You can see right at the bottom, they have a link. It'll take you over to GitHub. Once you go to GitHub, you can basically just download a zip file of every document right on the repo. This would get you a collection of markdown files, which is sort of a standard for writing styled content. There's a lot of markdown apps that can read markdown. A lot of web CMSs support markdown. So this is pretty standard. You would just download it. We're going to let that download in the background. I don't know if you can see that too well. But basically, I'm opening the zip folder in the background. Now, how would you edit this content to turn it into your company's style guide? Well, like I said, there's numerous ways to do that. You could do it with Google Docs. I'm going to do it with a text editor, which is what I'm comfortable with. There's a free text editor provided by Microsoft called Visual Studio Code. So if I go ahead and just drag this over, let's see if I can do this. Drag this over. Wait, I think I am. Drag this over into my doc, and I'm going to drop it on Visual Studio Code. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to open up a project. I don't know, it's hard to see, so let me know if you can't read this stuff, but I'll keep it pretty high level. We're not doing anything crazy here. So the first thing I'm going to do is click through some of these files. So you can see these markdown files. It's basically just text with some styling built into it. So the first thing that I can do very simply is replace every instance of Mailchimp with my company's name. So how would we do that? Well, we're just going to do a find and replaced. So I'm going to literally just type in Mailchimp at the top here, and I'm going to replace it with whatever my company name is. So I'm going to say my company ABC, that way I can reference it back. And then if you hit return and we can click this little button, it'll say, do you want to replace 189 occurrences across 22 files? I'm going to say yes. So literally that easy. I've gone ahead and replaced Mailchimp out of there. And and what Mailchimp has developed is not right for my business, and it's not going to be right for your business. But the point is, this will get you most of the way there, and then you can just remove stuff that doesn't make sense. You can pull pages out. You can customize stuff. But this gets you a lot very, very quickly that you can use to work from, and that's what we're going after here. So now that we have a brand new style guide from Mailchimp that has our company name in it, the next part of this is let's get this into some sort of a content management system. So like I said, we're not going to use Google Docs. We're going to take it to a website. That way we can follow sort of what Mailchimp's doing, which is posting it publicly on the web. Now, why would you want to do that? I mean, personally, I think there's a lot of benefits to publishing stuff freely available on the web, or not publishing freely, publishing your stuff on the web so other people can read it. When people refer to Mailchimp's website here, let me go back one, This gets so many backlinks now because they put this out there on the web for free. So many people refer to this as a great example of a style guide. You could do this for your business. So if you do this for your company, put it on your website and offer it up to other companies, most likely other companies are going to find it and link to it, and it's going to sort of continue that loop. And it's going to do great for SEO as well. So in addition to that, future employees who see this stuff, they're able to actually see what your company represents and what you're trying to do on the web. So I just see so many benefits to actually just putting this stuff on the web and obviously like tailoring it to your business. I'm not saying copy Mailchimp and just throw it on a website. You know, that's not the right thing to do. But regardless, let's get this into a content management system and get it connected to our website. So how do we do that? Well, I have an app here. It's called Contentful. I'm already logged into my account, and in Contentful, this is similar to you building a website on WordPress or Squarespace. Now, I'm not going to get too into the weeds with coding or anything like that. I just want to keep it very high level to show you how fast we can get this to a website. So Contentful provides a platform that's basically an API CMS that you can dump content in, and you can structure the content any way you want, and then you can build a website and just connect to the content. So that's basically what we've done here. So I'm going to go into Contentful's content model feature, which is where you can actually create content or create structures for content. So I know it's hard to see here, but I've created 3 parts to my pages: a title, a URL, and the body of content. That's really all I need for this style guide. So that's what I've done, and I've already set that up before I came into this account. So now that we've created this page structure, now we just have to add the pages. So I'm going to click over to content, and then if I want to add these pages here, I'm going to go ahead and flip back and forth to the Mailchimp website because I'm going to do some copying and pasting. So for this demo, I'm going to keep it really simple and just do 3 pages. I'm going to do an overview page, and then Mailchimp has at the topmost, top left there, writing goals and principles, and then voice and tone. So we're going to create those 3 pages. So I'm going to go back into Contentful and do those. Really quick, I'll just type overview, and then I'm going to do some lorem ipsum text right now. I'm going to publish that. So I've just published content into my CMS, and now that would be, you know, again, this is not connected to anything until you actually build something, which I've done. So let's go ahead and duplicate this, and then I'll just rename this goals. You can see it auto renames the URL. I'm going to click publish, and then one more time here, I'm going to click and type voice and tone, and it's going to create the URL for that, and click publish. So now on the front end, I have a demo website. This was a startup that I worked on. It was actually my startup from a couple years ago. I created a demo site here. So I'm going to refresh this style guide, and let's see if this actually works here. And again, I didn't do any design work at all. So basically, that quick, I've gone ahead and created these 3 pages, and it's now tied to a live website. Like, you could visit this on your phone at demo.squarefront.com/styleguide. So now the second part of this, let's go back to Contentful here. I'm going to refer to my Visual Studio Code Markdown, which I've already downloaded. I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to grab some random content. I don't even really care what page it came from, but I'm going to go ahead and paste that into Contentful. And just to show you how this works, you're pasting Markdown in on the left-hand side, and it gives you sort of a live preview. And you can see it already has our text updates from Mailchimp. Looks like I don't need this sort of metadata here at the top. So let's wipe that out. And let's click Publish. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. I'm going to grab another page of content. I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth. It'll all make sense soon. So let's go down to Goals. Pasted that content in, deleted the meta. Click Publish, and let's do one more. Copy that, and we'll go back and Overview, last page. So I'll paste that in, and delete and republish. So if we wait a second, we go back to our live website here. Let's see if this works. I'll hit refresh. There's our content, that easy. So because this is already connected, any change that I make goes live on the web. If I click Goals, there's the other content, completely different. I click voice and tone, and then that's going to be completely different as well if it actually loads. So that's simple. Like, we've basically taken Mailchimp's style guide and we've customized it a little to our business. Now, obviously, we want to spend a couple days or weeks refining that to our business, but the reason I recommend this, and the reason I'm trying to kind of just show you high level how fast you can do this, is because so many businesses don't do this. It's insane. When you're sending customers written word, and then you hire someone, like let's say a contractor or a vendor, and they're managing your social media, they're without any direction, they're just going to do whatever they want, and that's going to be bad for business. I mean, a lot of companies have experienced this, where they might have a style guide, or they might have very like small little like rules for how they communicate, but without laying this out in documentation and bringing on new employees, bringing on contractors, they're just going to do whatever they want, and that's going to be terrible for business, and you're not going to really know what's going on here. So you want to just create consistent communication all across the board in every single channel, and I think a style guide will actually does that. So that being said, that's the style guide. That's the web content style guide. Now I'm not going to jump into all the little details on what should be in a style guide, but what I will do is at the end of this talk, I'm going to put this on speaker deck and have links to all these companies like Mailchimp, Atlassian, Airbnb. There's a lot of companies who release this stuff for free, and that can give you sort of a good idea of what you should put into a web content style guide. And again, if you follow some of the steps to get it into a content management system, it's pretty easy to get that straight on a website and start sharing it with your employees and the world. So that is it for style guides. Now I'm going to jump back into Keynote, and the second part of this, so at the beginning of this talk, I mentioned style guides and design systems. So there's actually not much of a difference there. So now we're going to talk a little bit about design systems, and I love this Venn diagram here. Sorry, it's probably hard to read, so I'm going to try to explain a little bit what's going on. But a design system is actually a collection of a number of things in your business. It includes actually a lot of things that have to do with communication, design, and engineering, and documentation. So you can see here, if you look on sort of the, let's see, where is this at? Right in the center, style guide. So there's so much overlap between the style guide and other things like your documentation, your voice and tone, design principles, assets. So once you start building and you make the step to just create like a web content style guide, which I feel is the most important out of all of those. Now, I'm sure some would disagree, but I feel since that's, like we said, you're communicating with the public and your clients and your potential clients, that is the first place to start. And I think it's the easiest and the best one to do first. Once you do that, then you can start building out some of these other components that are around it, like your brand guide, your UI library. Maybe it's engineering components that that go hand in hand with your UI library, documentation, your content strategy for your website. It all sort of works together. So without going through every single piece of this, I figured let me grab one which I feel is the second most important, which is your brand guide. Because funny enough, so many businesses don't have a brand guide as well. A lot of times when you talk to a startup, or you have a new company, they're going to hire a designer, or if they have a designer, they're gonna design a logo or a symbol or a word mark, and they just keep it at that. And a lot of times if you ask the company, hey, do you have your brand guide? Like let's say they're hiring me to do a website for them, and then I ask for a brand guide or style guide or whatever, a lot of times they'll just send you like SVG files for a logo. It's like, yeah, here's my brand guide. Like, that's not a brand guide. That's basically just a logo. What you need is, you need something from that company that tells us what the brand is. Like, what does this company represent? What does this symbol that you're giving me actually mean? And that's what we're going to talk about now. Let's jump into a demo for how to create a brand guide, because a lot of people don't actually know. Again, I'm going to keep this high level, but I'm going to try to do this in the fastest way possible to give you some things to work with here. So because we're already in Keynote, personally, I think building a Keynote brand guide is definitely one of the easiest ways to go. I don't think you should take a brand guide to the web. So much like we just did this content style guide and we put that on the web, I don't think we should do that with a brand guideline or a brand guide. A brand guide is going to be more for your internal teams, and it's also going to be for new employees and contractors and vendors. So think of it like this. If you're starting a brand new company, and maybe it's only 1, 2, 3 people in the company, as you try to grow that company, you're going to hire people. You're probably going to do contractors first because that's easy. You need to be able to deliver a brand guide, and especially if you're going to do something like build a website or build, like, let's say it's the core application that your idea is. You need to give them a brand guide and say, like, here's what our company represents, and here's a little bit about us. That's what we're going to try to do in this demo, and the easiest way, like I said, is through Keynote. How would I do this? Well, I have basically, for the most part, a default install of Keynote. I only have 2 additional fonts installed, but I'm going to show you the absolute easiest way to create a brand guide and what we can use, and we'll look at some companies as we get into this. Now, I didn't intend for everyone to come here and just watch me use Keynote. Bear with me. Within 5 minutes or so, it'll start getting into the good stuff. But the setup for this, it's super easy. We're just going to create a brand new theme in Keynote. I'm going to use the default black. When Keynote opens, I'm going to make one minor change, which is change the slide size to widescreen. So there's our canvas. Now, when you create a Keynote, Keynote is simply just a collection of slide templates and styles, text styles or button styles or whatever. So those are the 2 things we're going to do really quick. We're going to set up a couple slide templates, and we're going to set up some text styles, and then that's going to give us basically everything we need to actually create the style guide in terms of a template. And the reason you want to do a template is because when this brand guide turns into 30, 60 pages, if you make one change to the template and save that, it pushes down to every single page. So it's a pretty seamless and awesome way to create a brand guide. So let's get started. So the way to do this in Keynote, sorry if the screen's cut off there, but I'm going to try to talk through it as well. So in the far left corner of Keynote, you can click the drop down and it'll say Edit Master Slides. And on Master Slides, you'll just see every single slide template in this default Apple install. Well, the cool thing is we don't need many of these things. So I'm just going to wipe those out with the delete button. I'm going to get rid of a whole bunch of them here. Let's see, we're only going to keep photo and this one. Literally, I'm going to just stick with these. So the first one is our title and our subtitle. That's going to be our main slide. So that's literally just going to say like style guide, XYZ company. The second one, we're going to call that content. So this is going to be our content slide. I'm actually going to put that in the 3rd position. And the second one is going to be, I'm going to call this a section cover. So basically the structure of this brand guide is going to be an intro slide, and then we're going to go into a section, kind of like a title, then content, then another section, then content. Pretty simple. So I have a file where I have a couple colors that I'm going to reference here, and watch how fast we fly through this. So the first thing is let's do this title slide. You can see this is pretty ugly by default, so I'm just going to go ahead and move that. Basically, let's go ahead and just do a couple quick styles here, style adjustments, and again, within minutes we'll be finished with this. I'm going to move the body down here. I'm not really paying much attention to the alignment right now. You can go back and fix this later. I just want to show you sort of the high level. So I'm going to adjust this title. I'm going to give it a font called Chronicle, and let's do Chronicle Light, and then let's up this to like 142, so it's huge for the title. And then the second part, let's change that to let's do Gotham, which is pretty overused, but oh well. Nope, I screwed up there. Let me click Gotham, and we'll bring the size down to like 42 or so. That's it. I'm going to update that style, and I'm going to update that style, and then click Done. So this is literally our slide title. So we're going to say style, if I could type, style guide, and then a presentation of our company's brand. And then if we preview that, that's literally the cover. Now, obviously, it's a little too far to the left. We're not going to worry about that for this demo. But that's our first slide, pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and just duplicate that. And then I'm going to change the master. So I'm going to pick section cover. So this is our section cover style. And for this one, I'm going to say something like, I don't know, introduction or personality, whatever. Whatever you want to start with is up to you and your business. But now we have to adjust the actual slide. So let's edit the master slide. It's going to take us into the section cover. And now for this, I don't want to use the same as the title, so I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to use a different color here. Let's use this blue, and I'll change the color. Pop in a hex color here. No, that's not blue. Why didn't you guys tell me that was not blue? I think it's this. Cool, we'll go with that. And then let me change title. I'm going to name this section title. So I'm going to create a custom style specifically for this, and then I'll go ahead and pick the overused Gotham, and then we're going to go thin, super thin, and then we'll take this down to like 92 or maybe 82, something like that. And we're just going to put this like right there. Again, I'm not worrying about alignment. We don't really need to. So there's introduction. So now, if I click play, we start with style guide, a presentation of our company, and then we go into a section cover. So the third and final part is content. So this is kind of the fun part because this is where you get to go crazy and do whatever you want. So for content, we're going to break up the style a little bit. So let's go ahead and do white, and then let's create a new style. Let's first pick section, and then we'll name it, we'll say content title. And then for this photo, it's a little too large and in your face, so I'll move this here. But aren't those people lovely? So let's move this over here. And we're going to basically just create, I guess the template for this content slide is going to be sort of written content on the left and then an illustration or photo on the right. Let's keep it pretty simple, and you could customize this all you want if you decide to actually try this. So for this, I'm going to do black. I'm going to move this up. And actually, let's do black for this as well. I didn't want to do blue there. And let's change this to Gotham because that display font does not look right. Let's do medium, and let's take this way down to like 52 or maybe 42, something like that. And then let's make this light so it's not so bold or thin. Almost done here. We almost have a template, and then we're going to start putting content, and this is going to look awesome. Maybe. Okay, so let's create that. Let's change the master. Content. Didn't pick up my my background color here. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Add a slide. There we go. All right, so we have some content there. So now I'm gonna refer to a major company that I love. Oh, I almost threw my headset off. So Atlassian is doing awesome on their design website. So Atlassian.design, and on their site, you're going to get some amazing content all about their business, all about what they're doing in terms of design, brand guidelines, marketing, product, everything you could possibly want is on here, and this can give you tons of ideas for where to go with this. So if we click brand, you can see they pull up a little side menu there where it talks about personality, writing style, color. Like this would give you a lot of great ideas for what to actually put in the brand guide. What I want to show you is just how we can sort of structure it. So here's a couple ideas, especially if you have zero design resources and zero money and you're just trying to build something that looks pretty. One way to do that, I'm going to show you a resource here called Undraw, undraw.co, and this is MIT licensed illustrations that you can use in whatever. And basically, if you click onto Browse Now, it has all these pretty nice illustrations for all different types of use that you can go through. So I already downloaded a couple of these in illustrations folder here, so I'm going to leave that there, and let's go back into Keynote, and let me take this out of full screen, and basically let's replace. Let's see here. Let's grab our illustration folder. Let's drop that in. Make sure you guys can see this okay. Let me make this a little bit larger. So if we need to increase the size, we can do that surely. And let's do something like, I don't know, personality. So that was in Atlassian. And then again, let's do some lorem ipsum text. And this is way too large, so I'll have to make an adjustment to the master on that. So let's do that really quick here. Let's edit master slide. I will go to, let's do body, and then let's take that way down to like 24, and then because I changed the text style, it changed the color on me. Done, and it took the color down. Now obviously we want to probably work on, it looks like the typeface is not the same, but we can do that on another, in another demo. So what I'll do here is I'm going to cut out some of this text here. I'm going to just kind of copy a couple things here. One of the things too when you're working on the style guide is bold makes a hell of a difference. So if you just have a wall of the same style, it just kind of fades away and you can't really see it. So breaking up these little sections with bold and different things in the text would go a long way. So it looks like our margins are too tight. We can adjust that later on, but basically, 1 second here. Let's just do that now before I forget. Let's take that down. Let's change that to Gotham. And we will do light. Let's do update. Done. So if we make a couple copies of this and then we drop some images in some of these other ones here, And then we copy all of these and we duplicate and duplicate again. And then we're basically now starting to create a structure. So let me play and show you how far we've gotten in just 5 or 10 minutes or so. So we start off with a style guide. This could use some alignment and design work, but again, we can keep it pretty simple here. Then we go into introduction. And then as part of the introduction, this is where we're going to start throwing out whatever content that we want to tell people about our brand. So with a brand guide, we want to just demonstrate anything that you feel is useful. And again, use Atlassian, use some of these bigger companies to get some ideas. The way I recommend is to kick it right off with like your mission statement, what you represent, maybe even your logo, talking about that. If you have your logo, you can lay that right into the presentation. There's some cool apps where you can take a logo and just create like sort of additional versions of it pretty easy. If you don't know how to do that, there's tons of tutorials online, and I'll have some of that in the speaker deck as well. But you can see as we go through here, the content's all the same, but we're sort of changing the illustration, and then whatever this section is, if we want to say logo or color palette, or how you use fonts or how you use type in your application or your website. And we can just go through and create this. So that easy, we've gone ahead and created a brand guide. Now, again, I refer to some of these bigger companies because they're some of the biggest companies in the world. This is where you're going to get much of your ideas. Envision releases some incredible content where they actually work with some of the biggest companies in the world, like Slack and Yelp, to get their content onto Envision so that they can share with the world. So if you look at Envision's site here, there's tons of stuff you can read. There's assets that you can get ideas from. Intercom, which is the chat support application, they have some phenomenal content online on their blog that'll give you tons of ideas. And again, I do think Atlassian's one of the most impressive that I've seen. It's just so complex and it has a great style to it. So I urge everyone to just go through and sort of flip through and see how they describe their brand. This will give you tons of ideas for what you can actually get into the keynote. Now, some of you might be asking why use Keynote in the first place. I think it's for the most part, it's pretty obvious. So Keynote, once you have it in a presentation, you can export this to a PDF. And once you have it in a PDF, that's when you can actually distribute it to vendors and contractors and your employees. And then, hey, in the future, if you ever want to take this to web, you have a pretty good template to work from. And of course, you can make changes to it as necessary. If you hate Keynote or you don't have a Mac, Google Slides would work just as well. They just don't give you the ability to change the fonts beyond Google Fonts. But for the most part, this can get you pretty far. So going back to, if I have it here, let's see where my other Keynote presentation is. I might have closed it. Going back to our Venn diagram, which is what I want to show you. Let me full screen this again. So again, the brand guide is one part of this. And then we did the style guide to start. The next part of this, I'm not going to get into like what's next on your list or what should you do next, what's the next important thing to do. For your company, it's really up to you. How much time do you have? Who's on your team? What resources do you have? I recommend starting with the web content style guide. I then recommend moving into the brand guide, and then maybe something that has to do with sort of the visual design of your website, since marketing websites are so critical. But again, it's totally up to you. But the beauty of this diagram, and the reason I loved it, and shout out to Nate Baldwin on Medium who created this, but it shows the overlap between some of these components in the design system. And what you'll find is once you start doing the brand guide, like let's say you started with the content guide, then you move to the brand guide, you'll see where the overlap is happening, and you'll see that your style guide will help you write the brand guide. And then when you create the brand guide, it's going to help you define how your UI component library is going to look. And then when you start creating UI components and design components, you're going to bring that back into your style guide and your brand guide. So then you're going to create consistency across your entire design system. Now, that's not something that happens overnight, but if you follow those steps, that's how you're going to get there. And that's why I start, I recommend starting with what I think is one of the easiest ways, which is define a style guide, and then obviously define the brand guide. And then, it's really up to you after that. So that is the presentation. So I just wanted to cover those two components, the style guide and the brand guide. And I wanted to leave time for Q&A because I wanted to hear any questions from other designers or anyone who's basically just trying to get into this and doesn't know sort of where to go. So with that being said, let's close it there. And then if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them out. And that is it. Thanks for coming, everyone. it's tough because it really depends on the company size. So, obviously I work at a company like Uber. We have tons of employees. So it's a little bit easier to find someone to work on this or find multiple people to work on it. A company like Uber is actually going to have multiple style guides. And then eventually, it'll get to a point where it's like, why do we have multiple ones? And then that'll kind of converge together. And then you have organization or some of the sub-organizations sort of working together, creating the same one. So now all of a sudden you have multiple teams contributing back to this. A lot of these big companies, like when you look at the Squarespaces and the Ubers and the Airbnbs, they use a lot of internal tools to do this stuff. So like Google Docs is kind of the simple one. I think most companies use that, but Confluence and some of these other like internal like intranet applications are a good way to at least get the documents on there. And once the document's on there, I really think it's all about governance, which is who has access and who's the decision maker on making those changes. So when you look at a big company, an intern or someone who just joined the company is not going to really be in a position to modify how we communicate with millions of customers across the board. That's just going to be impossible to do and not a good idea. But if you're a startup and you have maybe 5 people, a small team, that's much easier to manage because then you can work together, and then between those 5 people you can collaborate on it. Now, if it comes to the point where you don't have, I don't want to say skill, but if maybe your skill is not writing, like how do you define a writing style guide if you're not a writer? Well, I think there are things you can do, because if you look at Mailchimp's style guide, and that's why I want everyone to really go in and look at this, in terms of how it's written, of course, it's probably written with proper grammar and it's structured pretty nice. But I mean, it's stuff like, okay, our tone is usually informal, but it's more important to be clear than entertaining. Consider the reader's state of mind. So the reason I love pointing people to companies like Mailchimp for stuff like this is because this will give you sort of the roadmap of where to start. And then in terms of maintenance, it does get much easier once you have something. So it's kind of a hard question to say, like, what does it take? But I think once you have a document and multiple people can access it, and then there's sort of a structure in place for like maybe approvals. So like if you're the founder or the CEO of the company or the CMO, maybe you're the one that approves any changes. So I definitely think the governance piece is huge, because you don't want to put this document out there and let anyone change it. So that's a hard one, because with Uber, yeah, I mean, Uber did go through this, and there's only so much I can comment on. But when you have changes that you need to make, it's a much larger discussion at a company like Uber, because changing the tone of, let's say if you have millions of users using your app and you're sending push notifications a certain way, and you want to change how those push notifications are going out, that could cause a huge problem. I mean, you could just drop the read percentage or some of the OKRs that are associated with those platforms almost immediately if something goes wrong. So yeah, unfortunately I can't comment much on what Uber does, but I do know changes like that should be tested, and I think a lot of bigger companies have the infrastructure to test. So if you want to make a change in terms of the tonality of a text or push notification, you can all of a sudden run that test, send those out, see what the response is, and then take that back and make the case on what we should do. Usually at the bigger companies, like you have smaller teams that test changes like that, and then of course they take the results back up to a decision maker or multiple people to actually make that change. But I mean, you're right, when you're at a company like Airbnb, Facebook, or Uber, if you make a change like this to an already existing style guide, that could be detrimental to the business. Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about new companies and smaller companies doing this now. Because when you're smaller, it's much easier to implement all the principles. And like when you look at the work that's required, or the lack thereof, to build some of this stuff, and I'm not trying to paint this as being super simple and you can do it in a day, but at least you can get some of the foundations in place from the biggest companies in the world. And if you do this while you're small and your company just sticks to it, and that's just how you operate, when you start to scale, something's going to go wrong. When you bring someone on and they're not following any of the rules, it's going to be very easy to weed those people out. So that's why I'm so bullish on, like, I want people to do this immediately, especially if you're starting a company or you're about to start a company. Yeah, I mean, a company like Uber, so I mean, you could see like just at the scale and what Uber's doing, and they're launching different businesses. I think at this point now, like we've gotten our stuff together in terms of how we operate across the orgs. So a company like Uber, of course, we want to have We want to have consistent communication among everything we do. When you look at something like Uber Eats, because it's a different product, maybe it's a different approach, but I think some of the core principles are still going to stay the same. But, you know, again, if you're selling X and then you're selling Y, like there's going to be things that don't overlap. You're talking about food versus riders and drivers. So yeah, of course there's going to be some small changes, but I think some of these principles will hold true no matter what. I mean, it would definitely be weird if on the ride sharing side of things, like when you're requesting a ride or you're using the rider app, you're getting push notifications that have one sort of personality to it, but when you use Uber Eats and you're ordering food, for some reason you're getting another person. Like that would just be a disconnect to the customer, and I think that's like definitely the wrong way to go, because if anything, a company like Uber is trying to make people comfortable across these products. So when you use the Uber Eats, it's like, oh, that's just like the Uber app. It's just as magical, or you know, or whatever. Yeah, it's tough to say. I think every company is going to be different. I can't even speak for someone like Facebook that has like all these different products. Does Facebook operate the same as Instagram now? Like, who knows? I noticed, I'll show you a quick example. I think it's ux.mailchimp.com. So funny enough, when I was doing research on the style guide for Mailchimp, I found, not only did I find an old version of the style guide somewhere, looks like it's taken a little bit to load here, but Mailchimp also puts their UX pattern website, which is sort of like their UI library and some of those components. And if you go through it, you can sort of see some overlap in, you know, some of the components they build. And it looks like, you know, of course they're using them across some of the public facing websites, and you can see the consistencies in their app, but not only their app, but when they send, or when they build a website, when they send email communication, there's consistencies all across the board. I'm not sure if I answered your question though. So, yeah, I mean, like the going back to that Venn diagram that I had, once you start getting into this design system overall and you start handling like the style guide and you move to the brand guide and then maybe your UI, you'll definitely start bringing those components back in. I mean, we do that at Uber, and I think a lot of these companies do that as well. Yeah, that's a good one. So that's going to be up to the company. I know Airbnb has a lot of cool tools where when they build their design system and they build, like, let's say components in React, they have an automation pipeline where they send those right back into Sketch. And then I don't know what they're actually using it for. They have a couple blog posts on that. I think there's things you can definitely do. Like, you can make it easy, but it all depends on your platform. I'm big on platform. So the last 2 talks that I did was all about what is the platform that powers your web content. And I think that's your tech, and your platform is definitely going to tie into that. Yeah, it's unfortunately I can't speak for things that Uber has, but I know this is something we're working on, which is how do we automate and create consistency all across the org. Cool. All right, let's end it there then. Thanks for coming, guys.